Yeah.
All right, let's get into spring game recap. Well, Penn State had their spring game this weekend. It was a blue versus white game. This is one where you saw James Franklin kind of divide the team into two evenly matched teams. I know there were some people saying it wasn't all that well evenly matched, and I know some people were complaining about Julian Fleming being on the blue team and Drew Allar on the white team, and maybe you switch that up during the game. I don't know. When you get into that, it's always kind of like, these spring games, you could always do something a little bit different. He threw to him 14 other practices. I would hope that one practice wouldn't phase him too much. But Andrew, we'll go back to you again. What were some things that stuck out to you in this game, good or bad, whatever you want to start with in the spring game for Penn State?
Yeah, so I would say the overall takeaway that I had from it was that the defense definitely looked to be ahead of the offense. And, part of that is just because of the sheer amount of depth that the defense has across, most of the position groups. But also, it wasn't super apparent if you were watching it on TV, but the conditions for offense were brutal. Like, we're talking very high wind gusts, just a overall gusty day. I mean, we could tell you some horror stories from our tailgating before the game even took place. If we want to get into that, we can spend a few minutes on that. But it was a tough day, like throwing the ball anywhere. So, when you couple that with a new offensive system that they're trying to implement, most of the first team offense not together. Some of them weren't even playing in the game. So it wasn't a huge like offensive showing by any stretch of the imagination, but defense definitely showed up. Saw lots of guys having some great performances. Guys like AJ Harris, transfer from Georgia, the cornerback. He looks to be a natural. He looks just as good as advertised. Great in run defense and pass blocking, all that stuff. I mean, he just looked great. Amin Vanover, senior defensive end, he actually ended up being the MVP of the game, voted on by the team. He actually had an interception, which is something you don't usually say too often about a defensive end. But he looks good. And considering that they're going to be replacing Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac both going into the NFL, like that's what you want to see. And on the other side, on the defensive end side of things, Abdul Carter looks like he's a natural at defensive end. There was a lot of hype, a lot of excitement about his moving from linebacker to defensive end, and he looks like he is just right at home. He's so fast, he's so twitchy and so instinctive in getting to the quarterback. He looks like he was shot out of a cannon. And so even though it was a scrimmage, those tackles didn't stand a chance. So that's what I really took away from it. Other guys, on the offensive side of the ball that I thought had some good performances. Quentin Martin, true freshman running back from the Pittsburgh area. Franklin has been kind of what I would say lukewarm about Quentin Martin so far through his tenure at Penn State. Kind of keeps saying, or maybe he's subverting expectations by saying, he's still a little raw, he's still figuring things out, he's still, learning, but we expect big things. And I mean, he looked great. He scored 2 touchdowns. He looked fast. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was running against the first team defense, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Vince can correct me on that, but he looked really good. He looks college ready. Other guys, we were just talking about the receivers, Harrison Wallace, looking good coming off of injury. He led all receivers, had a couple of nice catches. And one thing that that really stood out to me was that they were scheming guys open. And that was something that was a constant topic of discussion last year, was Penn State not giving guys easy enough looks to complete passes. Some of those pitch and catch sorts of plays to get the quarterback into a rhythm, get him comfortable in the game, stuff like that. We saw some of that, and that was kind of a breath of fresh air, especially with a guy like Wallace who can do some good things after the catch. Super speedy guy. So hopefully he'll be healthy this year. He dealt with an injury bug last year, because he's really the kind of guy that if things kind of all fall into place, he could be that number one guy. There's just, a couple of certain pieces that would need to be in place there. And then finally, the big thing for me was that the pipeline of tight end really continues for Penn State. We saw Tyler Warren really take off last year. He's back this year, but there's also a slew of really good tight ends underneath him that are really young, guys like Khalil Dinkins, Jerry Cross. But we also saw some redshirt freshmen and true freshman guys like Joey Schlaffer and Andrew Rappelier really shine during this game. Andrew Rappelier especially is a 5-star guy, so So, there's going to be a ton of expectations placed on him. He looks just as good as advertised as well. So I'm really looking forward to see what they have in store. But I would say, expectations coming out of this game, with the caveat that it is a spring game, defense looks like it's ready to roll in 2024. Tom Allen is going to have those guys ready, and Kotelnicki's offense, it's still gelling, still coming into place. So we'll have to kind of wait until, the first week or two into the season to really see what the early returns are going to be there.
Yeah. Andrew, you kind of stole most of the guys that I was going to say, so I'm going to be echoing what Andrew said. But Quinton Martin, he looks like a stud out there, being a true freshman. I thought he looked great. His vision was fantastic, just hit the hole at the right time. The line looked good. I was really pleased with that. And if you're like a Penn State fan who looks into the future and worries about the long-term health of the team or the running back position, I think he's going to be the next stud running back at Penn State, with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen expected to declare for the NFL draft next year. Really pleased with his performance. I thought Trey Wallace and Caden Saunders did a really nice job of creating separation deep and getting open. Now, Drew is pretty inconsistent connecting with those two, but at the end of the day, there was 55 mile per hour gust, and I've lived in State College for over about 9 years, and I've never had a day that windy in my life. So I imagine that's very difficult. We were having a tough time in the tailgate lot, broke our metal tent in half. It was crazy out there. So definitely the conditions may have played a factor. Really pleased with how the tight ends look today. That's my favorite position to talk. One of my favorite positions to talk about. Khalil Dinkins continue to looks great. And he was a guy last year who he had maybe 10 catches and 8 of them were first downs or touchdowns. So he was a guy they could really rely on in clutch moments. So really happy with those things on the offensive end. Defensively, Abdul Carter, he's a scary man. There were times where he was so fast. There was one play I recall, Joey Slaffer didn't even touch him. He was so quick around the edge. And if the quarterback was live, he would have been drilled. So Abdul, added a little bit of muscle in the offseason, didn't lose any of his quickness, and he looks really good. He looks like a top 10 overall draft pick right now. Really impressive. Mid Vanover, really great game. He had a sack and an interception, and he made a comment after the game that, hey, I don't get many opportunities at these. If I have an opportunity, I'm going to capitalize. And he said last year, in his opinion, they were the best defensive line in the country. And he said there's no reason for that to change. So, I'm definitely on that bandwagon. They're up there with one of the top defensive lines in football. You got Devon Ellie's returning, Zane Durant, a lot of good guys on that, front four. So I think that's going to be a big strength of the offense. You saw Zack Wheatley get an interception. AJ Harris had 7 tackles on the day and a pass breakup. So a lot of things to really be encouraged about with the Penn State offense and defense.
Yeah, it really seems like Tom Allen has a lot of toys to play with here, a lot more toys than he probably ever had in Indiana. So, but I mean, I'm excited for Tom Allen to be able to have this defense. I was saying all last year, I was like, look, Tom Allen's going to get fired, but he's going to go somewhere and be a very good Big Ten defensive coordinator at some point. It just is a matter of who's going to snatch him up first. And when Penn State snatched him up, I was like, well, all right, I was already a little worried about Penn State. So here we go. I'm going to be even more worried again because, yes, Manny Diaz goes away, but guess what? Tom Allen comes in, who is arguably, if not a better defensive coordinator than Manny Diaz was, in my opinion. So it's a really good ad for Penn State, and I like the movement of Abdul Carter from linebacker to edge. I think or defensive end, whatever you call it these days. But I think that he's a better fit there. I think that he has more speed to get around there. I think that his tackling ability fits a little bit better there, being able to get in the backfield and instead of some of those open field tackles that he seemed to struggle a little bit with last year. But yeah, I think coming out of this game, I saw the stupid videos on Twitter of Drew Allar overthrowing people, and I'm like, well, maybe we should watch the game, people. Don't take one Twitter video and say, oh, there you go, Drew Allar stinks. It's like, no, he was throwing into winds that were very, very hard to throw into. So yeah, Zach, your thoughts on the game overall?
Well, I really agree with that assessment because I remember I think I saw on Twitter, here are the non-highlights of Drew Allar, and I'm like, listen, you don't know the context. Fleming was on the other side. The wind, I didn't know about the wind, but that's a really helpful insight. But I really, the main thought I had as we were talking, and I'm JR, you kind of took it from me, is I think it's because it's true. I think Tom Allen is in the position he is supposed to be in. I never thought he was a good head coach. I didn't think that was his, in a sense, his calling, but I think he has ended up, I think, very similar to Chip Kelly at Ohio State, which is they just want to coach football. And I think Tom Allen is in just such a great spot. And that defense, when you said AJ Harris, I'm like, of course Penn State has a great corner. They always have great corners. Their secondary has been one of the best in the country for the past several years. And I think same thing with the defensive line. I think Abdul Carter being at edge is just going to be, it's going to wreak havoc on all the Big Ten offenses. So I am still high on Kotelnicki as a coordinator. You're putting in a new system. So I think all I'm really adding to this is a yes and amen to everything you guys are saying. Because I think the defense looks great. I think the offense, you can't tell yet.
Yeah. And what's funny is what you just said about Tom Allen was really close to what was said during our conversation with Sammy from the Hoosier Huddle. Because he had, similar thoughts on like Allen's prospects as a head coach, and things were okay but not great, but coaching defense was really where his natural home was. His personality is perfect for it, his energy is perfect for it, his background as a linebacker is a really strong fit for Penn State, and the guys that they have available to them, namely Abdul Carter and others. So it's just kind of funny, it seems like everybody's kind of on the same page in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know
what fans are.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy that we didn't even really talk about this, but being linebacker, Abdul moving from linebacker to defensive end. Linebacker was one of the positions where Penn State had a lot of depth, and we had very low concerns coming into the season. Kobe King is coming off a great year. Dominic DeLuca is a veteran leader on the team. Tyler Edson is back. He's a veteran. Tony Rojas, I expect him to step up and have a big year in year two. He didn't get too much playing time being a true freshman, but Penn State likes to sometimes sit the young guys and give them time to learn and get experience before being thrown into those big games. So linebacker, I think, is another area where Penn State is really strong too.
Mm-hmm.